Hey everyone, Dave K here today talking about Star-Lord in Marvel Super War. Talking you through the strengths and weaknesses of Star-Lord, tell you about his abilities, and some of the items and the tactics you might want to bring along with this guy. I feel like he's a little bit tricky. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to play him or make him my first choice at least. I'll probably give him a shot. I mean, I'm going to give everybody a shot where I get the chance to use them. But let me take you through some of his strengths, weaknesses, and that sort of thing. One of the biggest strengths of Star-Lord is he has a lot of mobility. He's got the ability to sneak up on his opponents, maybe run in some bushes, hide in some bushes, and then use those rocket boots to launch off towards your opponents, deal some heavy damage to their back line. So that's a good way to use Star-Lord, is kind of sneak up on their back line, boom, 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 do a lot of damage to that back line, and get out of there as fast as you can. He does have that mobility, that ability to roam, and that ability to investigate different areas and move around quickly without necessarily being stopped by opponents. So that's a huge perk of the Star-Lord. One of the biggest things I would say, if you're looking for that mobility as a marksman, you may want to consider Star-Lord, because that's definitely a strength for him. I can't argue with that. That being said, there are some challenges for me too. Now, he does also have the ability to do some damage and to push that minion wave, especially with that ultimate ability, that rocket barrage, which we'll dive into, the Milano barrage, which is pretty cool as an ability. I like the idea. I like the idea of tying in the Milano and tying in some different components of the Star-Lord story and sort of pushing that wave or being able to defend off some towers against enemy champions. But it's not necessarily the most damage, especially since you can only hit one given unit 3 times before you stop getting damage out of that particular unit on that ultimate ability. So again, we'll dive into that here, but so far he's not looking like my number one. But those are a couple things in terms of strengths. Let's take a look at the weaknesses here. Starting off with the largest weakness is it can be really risky to play Star-Lord in this way. If you're trying to barrage that back line of the enemy team, you're trying to run up on them and quickly do some damage to them, it's easy for Star-Lord to get caught by his enemies. Maybe they trap him in place or use some abilities that prevent him from escaping, you know, bait him into coming for that back line. Or if you're chasing someone down later in the game with that movement speed, they could kind of be leading you into a trap. So it is a tricky playstyle, and depending upon who you're up against and kind of if they're able to outthink you and your ability to play Star-Lord, it can present quite a problem in that way. So that's something to keep in mind, is although you do have that movement ability, that doesn't mean that enemies can't necessarily outthink how you're going to move on them and then sort of gank you or trap you in that way where you're going to run into some trouble. Another challenge with Star-Lord is he's really reliant on his abilities and his abilities cooldowns and the mana that those abilities consume in order to really be able to do damage and in order to be able to really push for the team. You know, he really uses that combo of those rocket boosts and being able to use the Let's Rock firing style move ability there. And if not used correctly, or if you're waiting for those cooldowns, you could find yourself in quite some trouble against some enemy units. So this is something to keep in mind, is he's very heavily reliant on those abilities. And if you don't have those abilities at a given time, you may find yourself in a bit of a tricky situation. And one more challenge with Star-Lord is he's pretty easy to disturb. You can mess him up kind of easily, where early in the game he can run into a lot of trouble if you're going to gank Star-Lord, or if you're going to go one-on-one with an opponent and you keep dying as Star-Lord. Seeing as you really need to get that level advantage to be able to run up on your enemies, gank them with that firing, shooting abilities run, really go up to them really quickly, knock them out, and get out. If you are falling behind on levels, you kind of run into trouble for the rest of the game as Star-Lord, because you're kind of like the quick line, fire, bombardment, damage dealing type of guy as Star-Lord. So something to keep in mind is it can really run you into some problems if you aren't quite able to make that work and able to level up and able to protect yourself from dying too early on in the game. So that's just another thing to keep in mind with Star-Lord if you are considering playing him often. For Star-Lord's hero trait, he has elemental blasters. Take some of that basic attack damage or just attack damage, physical damage, that sort of thing, and converts that into energy damage. 20% of that damage is converted, and it's a cool concept. You know, you can do a variety of different types of damage to your opponent, which is great, right? Because if they start building armor, you want to make sure that you can penetrate that armor using an energy damage. So that energy sort of transition piece is great for hitting enemies almost from 2 different perspectives. It's from the energy side and from the physical side. So it's nice to have that hero trait to kind of buff that, but at the same time, it's not doing too much especially unique or special for Star-Lord that helps carry him through the match. It's a cool concept, and it can kind of be applied if you use it right, but it's not something that you have to be constantly mindful of or activate and that sort of thing. For 40 energy and 8 seconds of cooldown, Star-Lord's first ability in Marvel Super War is Let's Rock. Let's Rock allows Star-Lord to run in there and do his 6 shots from those blasters, fire elements shots, and deal some damage to those enemies. Really good way to run up on your enemies and deal a lot of damage to them, sort of rapid fire style. You also get some extra element shots for every 20% of attack speed that you're able to increase. So it's a way to do a lot of damage and fire a lot of shots at your enemy at a given time. I think this is one of the better abilities for Star-Lord here. Probably one of the ones you're going to want to level up more so than some of these other ones. Probably the first one you'll want to max out, in my opinion, but we'll continue to take a closer look at these. You'll see the stats here and get an idea of what you would want to max out first. I think this is probably one of his better abilities, but it really depends how you're playing a given game, how the playstyle is shaking out, what kind of opponents you're up against, and how the meta is looking. For 40 energy and a 10-second cooldown, Star-Lord has the Binding Grenade. Throw that Binding Grenade out there, and you're able to not only deal damage to an enemy with it, but you also stun the first enemy you hit with that for 1 second. So it's a great way to maybe protect yourself if someone's trying to sneak up on you from behind, if you find yourself stuck in a situation where you got close to too many different enemies and those enemies are closing in on you. You want to stun one of them and make it a little bit easier for you to control the field just a little bit better. Binding Grenade can be useful. That being said, it can be a little bit tricky to use. You want to make sure you're using it appropriately. Can't really use, if you look at that first ability, you can't really use anything, any basic attacks or anything like that with that first ability. And this one's also a little bit tricky with the third ability, where if you're moving that quickly with the rocket boots, kind of hard to appropriately apply this Binding Grenade here. But if you're going without your abilities, this is maybe your ability between abilities. This is maybe the ability you use to defend yourself while you're waiting for ability 1 and ability 3 to recharge. So just a potential for you to keep in mind there. That might be a good way to go about it. For 25 energy and a 14-second cooldown, Star-Lord has Rocket Boots in Marvel Super War. Allows him to move really rapidly for a 2.5 second period of time, applying those Rocket Boots for 2.5 seconds. It's a great way to rush that enemy's back line, to be able to knock off any of the enemies you're trying to knock off. Let's say maybe one of the enemies is running away from conflict, they're really low on health, and the rest of your team can't catch him. This is where Star-Lord really comes in, really shines. You can run up on that enemy and deal a lot of damage and knock him out. That being said, again, you want to watch out, make sure you're not being actually lured into a trap. And there's a lot of other enemies maybe hiding somewhere waiting for you to come and try to bombard them, when in reality they were expecting it and they're going to come knock you out. So something to keep in mind there is you want to make sure you know how many enemies are alive, how many enemies are knocked out, where some of those enemies might be before you try some of these damage bombing runs. But it can be a useful ability to get you there faster or to escape some of those more dangerous situations as well, depending upon the position that you're in. It's a nice way to move, especially as a marksman. He can move pretty quickly, pretty effectively, and get to where he needs to be with this ability. And for his ultimate ability, Star-Lord has Milano Strike. This is that bombardment run that I was talking about earlier, that he can deal some major damage on a particular area for an extended period of time. Every 0.2 seconds, those bombs continue to drop, but you can only deal damage to a particular enemy 3 times, the same enemy 3 times with this bombardment run. So they can't be completely destroyed by the bombardment run. So it could do a lot of damage to a wave of enemy minions, knock them out, maybe even push some enemy heroes back a little bit. They'll get a little bit afraid because they took a little bit too much damage, more than they were anticipating from this bombardment run. But it doesn't really do some serious destructive hero damage. If you're trying to knock out some enemy heroes, you really got to rely on your Let's Rock for that. And you got to run in there and knock out those enemies yourself, as opposed to relying on the Milano Strike. So there's pros and cons to this ability. It can be a great way to clear that wave and protect your team a little bit, or maybe to push an enemy wave, try to push in towards some enemy towers. But it's not necessarily the best way to control those enemy heroes or knock any of them out. As for the items for Star-Lord, this is a tricky question. There's so many different options for him. You might want to do physical damage. You might want to look at physical penetration or maybe armor reduction for your enemies. There's a couple of different options on this one, and it really depends on your playstyle. Depends how you want to go, what items might be best for you. I think Gungnir is probably a pretty good choice, sort of all around, depending upon which way you're going. That might be one to consider, but you probably do want some boots as well to, again, boost that movement speed, get in and out of those dangerous situations. Maybe something that reduces your cooldown or lets you use your abilities a little bit more as well would be useful for you. Just a couple different components to keep in mind as you're considering what items you might want for Star-Lord. And the Shield Tactical Scope is definitely another item you can consider here with Star-Lord. Do that % damage to your enemies. Seems like that one's got a lot of potential as well. So there's a couple different items there that you can consider. In terms of tactics, taking a look at the tactics for Star-Lord, I'm thinking you probably want to consider a couple different things. First of all, you want to get yourself a little bit of safety, a little bit of protection from the enemy fire as you're sneaking up on that back line, dealing damage to them. So you may consider it the Protect tactic, the Protect ability here to bring into combat. So you can grant yourself that mini little shield as you're going into the back line, dealing damage to those enemies, and quickly trying to bootleg it out of there. So that could be one useful skill to have. Another one is Blink, to be able to rapidly transport in and out of those situations. We talked about rocket boots kind of running you in there, being able to do that damage really quickly. But what about getting out, or vice versa? Maybe you used up you're waiting for the cooldown for your rocket boots, or maybe you were in there too long, you're still good, but you're still trying to catch that final enemy running away, something along those lines. Blink could be a great way to get to where you need to go as fast as you can possibly get there. So consider Blink as another tactic to utilize for Star-Lord as well. Overall, I'd say Star-Lord is cool. He's got some potential. He's definitely unique in a lot of ways, and I love how they've made all the characters so unique, and they all have their own unique abilities, very different from one another. Like this bombing run is really unique. You know, it's not something you see on a lot of other heroes, and it's cool how they tie in some of the backstory of these characters. I can definitely appreciate that component as well. In terms of me playing him, I feel like I'm going to run into some challenges. I'm not sure how well that's going to go for me. We'll see what happens, but overall, I'm excited for the game to come out. I'm excited to be able to play all the different heroes, and maybe things will change as the meta changes, as they're upgrading that beta and kind of moving into open gameplay and upgrading and adding all those patches and updates. We may see things change, so you never know. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. What do you think about Star-Lord? Are you going to be trying Star-Lord? Is there someone else you're looking forward to giving a shot? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, make sure you hit that thumbs up button to let me know that you liked it. If you haven't already, for more fun gaming adventures and a deeper look at Marvel Super War, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to stay informed. And check out the live streams on Twitch as well. You'll find me over at twitch.tv/DaveK. You'll see the link in the description below for that channel, so you can come hang out with us over there when we are playing Marvel Super War on stream, because you know that's going to happen a lot. Super looking forward to it. Thanks so much for being a part of the fun with me today, and until next time, play on.